I'm Ashton Addison from EventChain for Investment Pitch Media and FinTech News Network. Today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Dr. Mark van Ramanon, the founder of Maven and the speaker and author on the future of work. Mark, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Ashton. I'm really pleased to be here.
You're very welcome, and I'm excited to cover you cover personally a wide variety of topics, so there's so much that we could talk about. In your speeches and in your work, you've spoken about tokenization, blockchain, big data, fake news, and the future of work. So it's quite a breadth of topics. And with the recent acceleration of some of these trends because of the pandemic that's happening right now in the economy, a lot has changed for a lot of companies. Can you explain what trends you're seeing currently that are happening and have happened in the last few months with the change in the economy?
Sure. So I think we live in extraordinary times at the moment. The world is, I think, changing really fast at the moment due to the pandemic. The world was already changing due to new technologies coming and being used by organizations. But now you can see that a lot of organizations are forced to move to become a digital business. A lot of organizations have been really struggling in the past years to move to more remote work, to allow people to work from home, and all of a sudden, from one day to another, they had to work. The entire business had to work from home, and that is a massive change, of course. And I think in the first few weeks that it happened, organizations were a bit struggling. They needed to find the right tools, but now you see that more and more organizations are getting used to it. And it even is, I saw our first research here in the Netherlands, which stated that employees are actually happier with working from home because it also gives them some bit more freedom, spend a bit more time with the kids. And that, of course, there's also problems. If you are with 3 kids at home and you try to work, you try to do your work, it can be really, really challenging. But I think organizations now have to make that transition to digital. And the fact that they are sort of forced by the circumstances right now, I think can also, from a business perspective, can also be good. Obviously, there are also a lot of challenges when you come to working from home for organizations that can't really work from home. And with the whole social distancing policies that we have in the world, these kind of things are challenging for a lot of organizations. But for service organizations or like business that have employees in offices, I think this is really, really changing the game.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, Mark. And you've been studying the future of work for quite a while now, and a lot of people that have been studying this have been saying that these trends were going to happen anyway, right? Like a lot of these digital movements and telecommuting and using software to bring teams together was already a major upcoming trend. Did you see in your model of studying the future of work something like a pandemic and how that would affect this, and how quickly do you think if a pandemic didn't have happened, would have this trend for coming all digital have come in normally?
Yeah, well, I think the pandemic is a real example of a black swan, and a black swan was part of my research as well for my PhD at the University of Technology in Sydney, which I completed about 1.5 years ago, where I looked into, can you use big data analytics to sort of discover black swans, which is of course very challenging to do because it's called black swan for a reason. And these are events that are very, very difficult to predict. But in hindsight, it's very clear that that they would happen. The great financial crash in 2008 was one black swan, and this pandemic is a black swan as well. Although some people have predicted that it is coming. A famous example of Bill Gates, who in 2015 delivered a TED talk stating, we have to be, a pandemic is coming. We don't know when, but for sure it will be coming.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that it now arrived, I think the world will be look differently when we come out of this crisis than we went into the crisis. There might be, hopefully, some silver linings around this crisis that, helps us improve our work environment, helps improve even the climate. But that remains to be seen for how long this crisis will last.
Mm-hmm.
We've here in the Netherlands, we've now been in a so-called intelligent lockdown for a couple of weeks, if we would go back to work tomorrow or next week, I don't think much of the changes that we're experiencing now would be long term. But the longer this crisis lasts, the more people get used to the new way of working, and the more they are actually experiencing that, hey, look, this new way of working actually works quite well. And I think if we wouldn't have had a pandemic, people are reluctant to change. So I think it would have taken a lot longer for people to change their behavior, and for people and for organizations, large-scale organizations, to accept that remote working is a viable option. We've seen there are quite a few technology companies in the world who are fully remote, and they are thriving. And for them, it's just business as usual at the moment. I think the advantages of having digital employees, as I call them, employees that use tools to work remotely and to connect with their colleagues, have a lot of advantages. It makes your work a lot more efficient, more effective. And combined with other technologies such as AI, where you can create sort of so-called an augmented workforce, where you sort of blend the humans and the technology to help people become more efficient, I think that will speed up now quite dramatically in the coming years, I think.
That's very interesting. And I like that you touched on that there are positives coming out of this. And I could foresee, it's funny how people are reluctant to change, but when they're forced to, then they get into that new comfort zone, and now that's the new normal, right? And this is some of the terms that some of these larger companies have been using as the new normal, which is interesting to use that term with an unknown, time frame of when it's going to end. But with these positives showing on, in morale of the company, but also on the balance sheet from cutting expenses, maybe the margins are able to be increased. I could foresee a lot of companies that may want to keep those margins and not want to increase expenses when this all goes back to normal.
Yeah, for sure. I think what happens often during crisis that a lot of people, and we see that happening in America at the moment, where I think about 17 million people lost their jobs already, is that after a crisis, the production of a company gets back to normal quite quickly, but with fewer employees. So they are able to find new ways of doing the same work with fewer people, and I think that's what we'll see happening now as well. Where, for example, video meetings, they work really well, and I think a lot of organizations are now experiencing, look, I don't need to travel to China or to Australia or to America, wherever, to meet my business partners there. Cost me 3 days on the road, makes me tired, and it's very expensive. If I can also do it with 2 video calls, which work as well. And I think that is something that organizations now start to see. And in addition to that, what I think that will happen is with people more experiencing the benefits of working from home, you don't have to go in traffic jams. You don't have to. You can spend more time with your family. But more importantly, for example, if you live in a big city and you have to pay a big amount of money to buy a small flat to live close to your work, you can use the same amount of money to buy a freestanding house, for example, in a more rural area. So instead of going to the office 5 days a week, you go to the office 1 day a week. You ensure you have a nice office in your house, and I think you have a much more relaxed lifestyle in the sense that you don't have to be stressed and be in traffic jams and peak hours, etc. As a consequence, the housing prices will go down, but also as a company, you need less. You have fewer employees who need to be in the office, so you need smaller offices. So there's a lot of change coming in the next years, but it all depends on how long this is going to last. Obviously, we hope that it's not going to last very long, because of the terrible things that are linked to that. How long it's going to last depends on how big the changes we will see within organizations.
That's really interesting, Mark. And you touched on the fact that companies will be back to doing business, but with less employees and a leaner workforce. Do you foresee automation and robotics coming in and quickly replacing that workforce, or is it just more people are able to take on, or less people are able to take on more tasks?
I think it's going to be a combination of that. I think I read an article that in China we saw in the past months people already moving towards more automation. A robot doesn't get sick. A robot doesn't have to comply with social distancing. A robot can work 24/7. So there are a lot of advantages of having more robots within your company. Of course, it depends on what kind of business you are. But I foresee that trend will speed up because of this, because companies see that hang on, I can also have a robot, and yes, it's an investment, but with all the benefits I just mentioned, the return on investment is quite high as well.
Yeah, and humans are an investment as well. And you have to train them and health expenses and all of these other things. So weigh your options, right? So
Absolutely.
you were saying earlier that the future of work is going to be very data driven, and big data will be a big key. Do you see blockchain as a key component in the way that companies will collect data and use data in the future of work?
I think blockchain is going to be a very important aspect of as I call it, the organization of tomorrow. Basically, in my latest book, The Organization of Tomorrow, I write that every organization is a data organization, and to become a data organization, there are 4 steps that you need to go through. One, first of all, you need to datafy your business and your processes. So you need to collect the data, because otherwise you can't become a data organization. Then you need to distribute your data, and you distribute your data either through the cloud, if it's internal processes, and you use blockchain for external processes. And I think that's where there are a lot of benefits for the organization of tomorrow, because let's look at the supply chain. With the blockchain, you can have very clear provenance of how your products move through the supply chain and whether or not they are compliant with whatever rules and regulations you have in place. It makes, I think they say that if you want to send a bouquet of flowers, which is about this stack, you need about this stack of papers to come with it if you want to send it across the world. And with blockchain, that is just gone. It's all automated and digital. And I think that's a major example. The third step is then to analyze your data that you have collected and stored, centralized or decentralized. And the final step is to automate your business using AI and/or smart contracts. Smart contracts are very useful to automate certain decision-making processes. I think the combination of provenance and the combination of automation show that blockchain has a lot of potential for organizations to make the business more effective and efficient.
And you also touch on tokenization on top of the blockchain for companies when they're growing. What competitive advantage could a company get in its industry by tokenizing their assets or their securities?
Yeah. Well, I think tokenization is going to be a major force within the organization of tomorrow because it offers so many benefits. It's the advantage of being able to tokenize for example, your company or a building enables fractional ownership. It enables full liquidity, and I think that's something that this doesn't happen overnight. But I think once we have more tokenized assets in the world and you have full liquidity, I think that is going to change the economy. Because if you're a real estate investor and you have a $100 million building that you want to sell, typically it takes 3 to 6 months to sell that building, give or take. If it's a tokenized building and there's a proper secondary market available, then you can sell your stake in that building almost overnight. So meaning illiquid assets become liquid. And that is going to change the economy dramatically. And then the third advantage is that with tokenization, you can embed rules with the token. So you can embed your governance mechanisms within the token. So, for example, if you tokenize your company, your shares, you can state the longer you hold your token, the more voting rights you get, for example. These rules that you can embed within the token, basically embedding the governance in the code, I think is going to have enormous potential for organizations.
Wow. And all of this sounds really great, but is it already in use today? Or I know it's very likely in the early adopter and innovator stage. When is this going to get to the early majority? And do you foresee, companies throughout different industries using smart contracts, whether they know it or not, in day-to-day business?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is if you look at tokenization and fractional ownership, that is already possible in a lot of places in the world. However, it's very, very complicated and very, very difficult because we don't use the blockchain for that. If I want to tokenize my house, for example, I can do that, but I have to go to the notary to get it all sorted, and it's going to be very, very expensive. The challenge is legislation. I'm here in the Netherlands. I'm involved in a project called 2 Tokens, and our objective is to develop a roadmap for tokenization for the Dutch government. It took us quite a while to convince the parts of the Dutch government to join forces and show them the need and the importance of tokenization for the Dutch economy. So legislation is one part, which makes it difficult to do. Yes, you can already tokenize your building, but it has to go through the offline way of working. And to move it to the blockchain, that's simply not in the legislation, and therefore it is not possible. And the second is what we need a proper secondary market. And there are, of course, security exchanges being developed, and there are a few now operational, but the amount is still limited, and there are still some challenges there. So that's also what we need to do more, is to have more ability to exchange your security tokens, and if you want.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the securities marketplaces of the future, and looking forward to seeing one that works really efficiently. Now, that's all the time that we have for the interview, Mark. I really appreciate you coming on. If the viewers are looking to learn more about your work, about the future of work, or just your research, what's the best way for them to learn more and get involved?
Well, they can look me up on LinkedIn. Just Google just search for my name in LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on my personal website, which is basically my name.nl or .com. I'm happy to help anyone and get in touch and discuss these very fascinating times that we're living.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate it. I'll leave those links in the description box below, and let's follow up in the near future.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ashton. Have a great day.